a gummy bear.
It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this for April 24th, 2024. For the next hour or so, let me help you sort through the world of gaming on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, we finally found out exactly how stellar the Blade really is, and fans are divided about smooching in a video game. But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host of Game Mess Mornings. It's Imran Khan, everybody. Imran, how are you doing?
I'm doing quite well. How about you, Jeff?
I was doing better before I remembered that you beat us in a Game Mess Jeopardy that one time. You're one of the few people that beat us. I don't like that. That's upsetting to me.
But also, I was one of the few people that lost to you. So
that's right. I think of my revenge. Yes, one of the few people who lost. That's absolutely the right way to put it too. But yeah, how have you been recently? Long time no talk, actually.
Yeah, I've been good. I have come back to games writing, so I'm just kind of doing that full time now.
Awesome.
I just kind of like enjoying time playing video games. I started Prince of Persia: The Forgotten or Lost Crown recently, and that game, I know a lot of people have told me like, "Hey, this game's incredible," and I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'm sure it's incredible, but like, it's a Ubisoft game. I'll wait." I kind of regret waiting a little bit.
Yeah.
That game is actually incredible.
It's really good. It's still my favorite of the year so far, although I'm starting to get some stuff that like could compete with it, but it's just such a me game. I'm glad I saw you on Twitter talking about, hey, I'm going to give this game a try. I'm like, yes, another one who's definitely going to fall in love with it. It really is just so well done.
Yeah, it is probably the best Ubisoft game I've played in like maybe 5 years, maybe more than that.
Yeah, it just feels like they sat down and like, let's forget all this other stuff, forget all these things that we're always trying to cram into these games. Let's just make a really good video game in a genre and just do the best things in that genre that we can. And they really nailed all those aspects. Yes. It just feels so good. The pacing's so well done. It's just well thought out game.
Yeah, I absolutely love it.
Getting back into games writing, what was that process like? Was it painful these days? Or is it like calling up old friends? How does that work?
It's mostly like tugging on old network strings, basically. Yeah. It is like a lot of there are more people right now freelancing than there ever have been, which very much sucks for so many reasons. But it's a lot of like, hey, I wanted, do you guys have any reviews available? Do you have like, I have this pitch idea. Can we get started on this? So it's stuff like that, like Stellar Blade reviews, which we're going to talk about momentarily. Where I think like Tam just contacted me. It's like, hey, do you want to review it for GameSpot? I said, sure. And we're off to the races then. Games writing is, I think, the thing I want to do most. I've at this point dabbled in pretty much every side of the industry, like PR, development, agency PR. I like writing about games more than I like pretty much anything else.
Yeah, I've tried to like put myself in, because I was like kind of paying attention to what you were doing a little bit, put myself in your shoes. I'm trying to figure out, who knows when I have to move on from whatever job in the future. It's like, would I be able to make that shift? And I'm like, I don't know if I could do what Imran's doing with like even like the dabbling. So I'm like, I gotta just figure out a way to make this stuff work. And so far so good, but it is the thing I like doing the most. And at this point, the skill set is so limited. I'm like, I better make it work. What if I can't do anything else? I'd be screwed.
That's the thing about having a household of 2 game journalists is we constantly have that conversation of like, okay, so what do we do if this all collapses tomorrow?
Right, yeah, exactly. And there's not much to be done. And thankfully, though, it's like, okay, seems like it's working. And you got the review done. Do you have like other stuff like lined up? Or is it like, what is it like out there? Is it like, I know you said there's a lot of freelancers. Does that mean that there's just less work than what you would have imagined?
Yeah, it does. It means that everyone is kind of like, you ever see one of those movies where like they approach the shark tank or the piranha tank or whatever and like throw in a drop of blood and like the water starts bubbling? That is pretty much every single video game.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And every single idea you could possibly have. Because I cannot count the number of times I emailed an editor being like, hey, I had this pitch for a feature. What if we did something like this? And they're like, hey, this sounds great. I already made this picture, like this deal with someone else on basically the same subject, which is understandable because we're all kind of living through like a hell world right now, but like everyone's talking about the hell world too. So there we can't really like, it's very hard to make forward momentum unless you're kind of trying to climb up the backs of other people. And I ideally don't want to do that. So we're it is a rough situation out there, but it's still workable, at least for the moment.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where it's I always like try to put the ladder back down, and it's like okay, I'm putting the ladder back down, and but I should warn you, there's nothing up here. There's literally nothing left up here. It's all honestly, it wasn't even scraps what I got here, and now it's less than that. And so it's like I don't know what the climb up really looks like anymore. So yeah. I think like to survive to 25 is our mantra. We'll get there. Does it make it better? I have no idea. I
think we'll bounce back at some point because like I think at some point. So I was talking to a studio head, which I don't want to like name, but they were saying something like, we're going to bounce back next or in a year or two, because right now everyone's realizing that they fired everybody and they need to actually make video games soon. So like, I think games journalism is going to lag about a year or two behind that for the games to actually like show up. But we are going to get to the point where we're going to need games writers again, and they can't just have AI write guides or whatever for the next couple of years, because it's not going to be sustainable. Because as cynical and stupid as it is to say, those guys need something to train off of. And unfortunately, games writing is going to be that thing for a while.
Yep. Like, you're not wrong, but man, that feels bad to say, but you're 100% right. All right, let's explain what we do here. Most weekdays, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe even some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you were watching live on Twitch, welcome. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings, or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. You could also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. All right, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with Stellar Blade Review Roundup. I think when I last looked, it had an 82 on Metacritic. I think it has an 84 on OpenCritic, which is right around where I was expecting based on like playing the demo and playing a little bit of the final game in the last night or two. Let's get into these reviews real quick, and then I'll see what Imran thinks. Imran, you reviewed this for GameSpot, right?
I did, which is the one site I can talk about in here that no one has a problem with.
Yeah. All right, let's start here with Stephen Mills at Destructoid, who gave it an 8 out of 10 and said, overall, Stellar Blade is a journey worth experiencing. I feel like with some improvements in certain areas, Stellar Blade could be a legendary landmark experience like those it clearly draws inspiration from. But even in its current form, Stellar Blade offers a fast-paced action combat system in a unique world with a rewarding narrative. It's not quite stellar, but it's certainly solid. Solid Blade, which, well done, Steven. We were all thinking it. 7 out of 10 from Gareth Chadwick. That's the 6th Axis, who says Stellar Blade is a pretty enjoyable game to swing your hairband sword at, so long as you don't mind the obvious sexualization. There's a few rough areas, but nothing to spoil things overall, and there's plenty of interesting story to uncover as you fight your way through giant monsters with circular saws for heads and weird tentacles for legs. Gonna jump down here to the Tech Raptor, where Austin Souther gave it a 9 out of 10. It said Stellar Blade stands toe-to-toe with some of the best games of the character action genre. This package offers a satisfying combat system with plenty of progression, beautiful visuals, and one of the best soundtracks in years. And then Tom Reagan at VGC gave it 4 stars. For those who wish that God of War Ragnarok offered a bit more challenge, or that Bayonetta had a bit more weight to its combat, this slick sci-fi slasher is the perfect tonic, offering both the perfect entry point into the Souls-like genre and a refreshing refinement of the well-worn character action formula. It may lack the navel-gazing intelligence of the excellent Nier Automata, but when you're having this much fun, it's hard to care. I am liking this game, Imran, from what I've played, and again, I'm near the beginning, but I streamed the demo a few weeks back, and I was like, oh man, things feel a little off. And I'm like, I wonder if it's like playing in this OBS window with just a little bit of delay, because I'm big into like the parry systems in these games, and that like is what like where it lives or dies for me. It's like, does the parry system feel good? I don't care if it's a tight window. I just want to be able to predict it and work with it a little bit. And then I played it on the TV, with no lag at all, and it like, oh, everything clicked. It feels really good. And then it's like from there, it's like, oh yeah, okay, this is a decent like upgrade system. I could see a lot of like potential here. I think the world does look pretty interesting. For me, 100%, this thing is taking from Nier. It's like someone played Nier and then they made this game, and I'm fine with that for the most part. It's not as interesting as Nier in a lot of ways, but I think personally the combat's more fun. That's me. People can yell at me. You reviewed this game. What'd you think?
So yeah, it is unabashedly taking from Nier. It is like absolutely that thing of don't copy my homework, or if you're gonna copy my homework, make it a little different.
Yes.
They didn't make it different enough.
No.
But like it, I think that is actually one of my bigger disappointments with the game. And I like this game. Going to GameSpot, I wrote a whole review. I gave it an 8. But like I think it tries so hard to be Nier, but it doesn't realize that why Nier was successful, why that story actually mattered to people, why like there's a
no, clearly
it tries to do this like kind of sci-fi pulp story that I think just kind of falls flat on its face. And a last minute twist that I won't spoil, but it like just makes things seem laughable in a weird way. And like the voice acting doesn't help. None of it's like a great story, but where it does shine is the gameplay. That combat system is nowhere close to immaculate, but it is fun.
Mm-hmm.
It is I love the idea that everything you do to survive in battle in terms of like dodging and parrying and all that, it all feeds into a larger system of needing to eventually fight back, and you're using like powering up those beta moves that you have that are actually like fun to use, interesting, like to decide when to use them. I think like this game has a ton of potential for a sequel. I know what everyone's going to want me to talk about, and it's going to be about the sexualization of that game. In my review, I didn't really make a huge point about it. It's there.
Well, I mean, let's be real. Like the response to this is a bunch of nerds being like, "I have a boner, and that's the most important thing in the world, and that's what we're going to talk about." And it's like, as most people come to this game, they're like, "Yeah, it's a sexy video game character. That's as old as time at this point. That's not that big a deal. So of course you're not like what." Like in a vacuum, you wouldn't make a big deal about it. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that.
If you're playing this game bricked up, you can get better standards for porn.
Yeah.
Like there is no reason to play this video game for the sexuality at all. I think what they put there is a little over the top. I think that like they absolutely could have pulled it back 20% and still been like, oh, still gotten the same attention to the sexuality that they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's there. For me, I just ended up tuning it out after like a couple of hours of this game. Then you put on a new outfit, and it's like, huh, they really went a direction with this, huh?
Yeah.
And like, I understand critics who do take that a lot more.
Sure, it's like, definitely something worth talking about. It's like I always think about like Cuphead, where it's like, hey, some of this stuff is inspired by cartoons that were racist. Let's have a conversation about that. It's like, well, let's have a conversation about that. That's completely fine. It's very similar to me. Where like, if you want to have a conversation about this, there's something there worth talking about.
Right. I also respect critics who don't do that, who did 100%. Say like, hey, there's a good game here. Whether you can get past the rest of it is entirely up to you. I actually spent some time like once I agreed to this review, like kind of dreading the idea like, oh, half the audience is going to tear me apart whether I like this or not.
Yeah.
And like that's kind of bearing out. Some people think I didn't give it high enough score. Some people think I gave it too high. So like at the end of the day with reviewers, you kind of just review the game in front of you.
Yeah.
But I absolutely do understand where people are coming from in their like distaste for this game. And I think if you do have a distaste for this game based on previews, you're not going to end up liking the full game. If you do think you want to move past that, you can move past that. You want to play a decent action game, this game is that. Like it is absolutely a fun game with moment-to-moment gameplay that is actually really interesting, and it dials like takes the spectacle dial that Bayonetta has and kind of moves it a little bit. Doesn't quite go that far.
Right, it moves it, right? It does. I don't know is it going up or down? It kind of just like shifts it to like laterally, right? It's like it's a different kind of spectacle.
Yeah. Towards the end of the game, it starts going like more platinum and less like. I'm trying to think of an action game that is not spectacle these days. It's definitely goes more platinum towards the end, but I do think like it doesn't do anything as good as like the platinum portfolio, oeuvre, whatever you want to call it. Like it's there, it's clearly inspired, but for me personally, I would rather play Bayonetta again than I would probably play Stellar Blade. But again, I didn't dislike this game in any way. I think it is a actually really good game. It needs to get off certain odd phrasing. It needs to get away from certain ideals that it wants to hit, and one of those ideals was to become have a sexy main character who I think they take a little too far here and there.
Yeah, I think it's I'm mostly encouraged by this game and when I look at it because it's this is a studio that primarily made mobile games before this, but it's a studio that also always seemed like they grew up playing games that were on console or on PC that were like that felt like quote unquote real games, and now here they are making one inspired by those and doing a pretty good job. And it's okay, and it's a team that previously wasn't doing this. They came into the space, now they are doing it. It's a sign that as other studios feel like they can't grow anymore and they can't do the same thing over and over again. That's sad, but there are new teams coming in here and replacing them and doing interesting stuff. And I don't think it's quite as interesting, and it's definitely derivative. But at the same time, I kind of I'll take that over that's like a gap in the market just being created because people don't want to do that stuff anymore. So I find it encouraging, and I'm having a pretty decent time with it. Do you think? You think this moves the needle for like the PlayStation 5 fans that are looking for a game right now for their PS5 after feeling like it's a little bit of a rut for them? Is this filling in that gap?
I don't think this is going to be a game changer for we just came off Rebirth and Dragon's Dogma and stuff like that. You have better options in terms of video games. This is not a bad option, but if you're looking for an action game, this is a serviceable. This is a good action game. I don't think that people are going to be talking about this game in 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
They'll be like, hey, Stellar Blade was cool. Stellar Blade 2 was better. Or, I think what this game is notable for is it's going to be when we first start talking about South Korea as a country for game development, we're going to be talking about this and Lies of P as these first opening salvos of games that were oh, that kind of came out of nowhere and it was actually pretty good. So I think we're going to start getting more that direction. And honestly, great for South Korea. There are aspects of this game I wish were changed, wish were culturally different too. But it is interesting as a fan of video games to watch another country suddenly start getting into console development in a big way.
Yep, in a way that's it wasn't necessarily oh, of course they're going to do that. It's no, South Korea's console culture is a little bit muted compared to PC, of course. So the fact that they're making these games and they're right there, PlayStation 5 exclusive, that's awesome. Lies of P is the other conversation I wanted to have here. Lies of P feels like one that got a little bit closer to its mark than this does. But it's, again, Stellar Blade's not missing it by some long shot. It's just they're both derivative. I think Lies of P feels a little bit more interesting. Is that accurate to you? I
think Lies of P is from the get-go just a more interesting idea of a Souls-like that is based on a what's the word? Free license that you can just use whenever you want.
Right.
And I think maybe that would have benefited Stellar Blade to go out, use something established versus trying to make its own story. Good point. But Lies of P, I think I'm incredibly excited for the inevitable Lies of P2. I don't know anything about any new game coming out, but I'm incredibly excited for that more than I'm excited for Stellar Blade 2, which I feel must exist because that game ends on a cliffhanger and you uses the word their journey continues or whatever. So I will 100% play a new Stellar Blade, but I don't think it's a knock out of the park that a lot of people wanted it to be.
Yeah. When my eyes rolled when it was oh, these characters called Adam and Eve, is that going to continue for me in the story as I play it?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to.
I also it signals way too much of what they're gonna do, and it's you treat this plot twist like it's a big thing, but also you basically told me this is gonna happen way earlier in the game. So
yeah, it's it feels sort of it's I'm trying to say this without making it sound mean, but it's kind of cute. The attempt here is yeah, they went for it, good for them, and that's very, I think it's shitty. It's shitty to say it like that, but I mean it in a positive way. This is, I think they went for something, and they have the sexiness and all that stuff, and if that kind of bothers you, I don't blame you. But it's I get what they're going for here, and I think they seemingly mostly pulled it off. And I'm gonna keep playing it.
Yeah. I think that this is 100%.
Thank you, Otto.
It's an example of how we have differing standards for different developers. Because if let's say Sony Santa Monica put this game out, we would all be what happened? What are you guys doing right now? But since it is a new game from a developer that's only made mobile games, that is coming from South Korea, that we're going, okay, we're gonna give this a chance. We'll give this a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. a lot of people aren't going to do that. I think that's fine, but I do think that like for the people who are looking for like an action game, you're looking at this with like different glasses than you would look at a Platinum game or a God of War or what have you, because that's just the way it is. That's just the game industry. We have to kind of not strangle everything in the cradle that we could.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of let these things have room to grow and breathe and figure things out on their own. And I think this game's absolutely going to get that chance. I think it's going to do way better than they ever would have imagined when they first started the project. So
yeah,
good for them.
It's unfortunate that there is a culture war around it. If you remove it from the culture war, it's still a fine game.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, we were on the Bombcast this week and like mentioned the culture war to like Dan, who doesn't really pay attention to this stuff on Twitter. He's like, what do you guys talk about? What people? It's like, oh man, that's right. There's a lot. Most people actually probably have no idea about the weird reactionaries talking about this game. And we'll get through today. I bet they still won't be happy with what is a very good review response to this game. 82
I'm
on
already
Metacritic.
Getting tweets.
I'm sure you are. Yeah, 82 on Metacritic is it's kind of like, that sounds pretty good. Like that's Liza P territory, which was exactly what I was expecting for this game. So interesting. Like I said, I'm going to keep playing it. We'll see. We'll play some more of it on the website tomorrow as well. It's going to be part of our grab bag, everybody. All right, moving on here. Embracer CEO says he deserves criticism after mass layoffs and game cancellations. Novel. This is from Eddie McCoo at GameSpot. The video game industry has been beset with layoffs and canceled projects in 2024. And one company in particular, Embracer, has received a wave of criticism for laying off staff, closing studios, and canceling games after a huge hiring spree and growth period years earlier. Embracer CEO Lars Wingefors said in a new interview that, as the CEO, he deserves criticism, but he says there's a job to be done, and he's plotting ahead to try to always maximize shareholder value in any given situation. A noble cause there. It's been painful, he told GI.biz, but I still believe in what we do. I believe in my teams and the vision we set out. I also believe that public markets, if we do it right, are a fantastic place to finance your business and tap into both investors and the debt market. But you need to execute well. If you do, it could be a fantastic platform to enable growth and to really have a competitive edge. And I think for as much of a word salad as that is, I think it's pretty illustrative of where this company's coming from. Imran, he starts by saying, oh yeah, I'll take my criticism. But kind of immediately shifts to talking about, like, I think what is he says the word vision. We've never had a vision for Embracer Group, right? That's always been the issue. It's like everyone's like, how is this all going to work? It seems like it won't. You must know something we don't. And the entire time it's like, well, I don't actually, no one thinks we actually do know what you're doing. And then everyone was proven right there in the end, unfortunately. Now, and then he shifts to, and the public markets are a great place to raise money, which is why they're splitting into these three companies. That makes it a little bit easier for them to finagle more value out of the market by raising, stock shares and stuff like that. That is the vision, right? That's the whole idea here is get more money flowing in, and then we'll figure out the rest later. It sounds like the same old Embracer Group to me, Imran. What do you think?
It actually, like, I've been following Embracer for years at this point, because like when they first started coming out and buying all the THQ Nordic stuff, I'm like, some part of this doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
Then what they started to do is take in a bunch of loans without an actual plan to pay those loans back.
Right, back when capital was super cheap. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they wanted to use like Saudi Arabia investment to pay back those loans, and that didn't work out. What essentially I'm hearing from Lars Wingefors is him saying, yeah, those last 5 things didn't work, but this identical plan might work better. And I don't. I mean, obviously, there's no good CEOs. No. There are a lot of like really, really, really bad CEOs and a lot of really dumb CEOs. And I think Lars Wingefors is kind of, if he had not already been on the side of dumb CEOs, he is there now.
Yeah.
Because I agree, Lord of the Rings is a good buy. That makes sense to have. It's funny that they've worked around for about half a decade from using that multiple head Hydra idea of having like Coffee Stain and Coke Media and all that, like, operate as interoperable but also independent heads of GmbH, the THQ Nordic group, but also like not really getting each other's way to being one monolith that completely fell apart because it was way too top heavy among other reasons. And like now they're just back to where they were. And it doesn't, I don't understand really how this is going to work any better, except for the idea that Lord of the Rings is a big property.
Right.
And now that they're managing that, they can't fail in theory. And I think that's a dangerous way for any CEO to come back at it.
Yeah. And again, it's like we talked about this on a Bombcast yesterday. It's like, you know, as Embracer Group, when you are listed on the not NASDAQ in Stockholm or wherever it is, it's like, okay, they've sort of maximized like the interest in that. By breaking it down, separating it out, you get a new chance to sort of pitch these smaller entities to potential shareholders, and then you could raise money that way. And it is about raising money. So like that is the strategy. It's just like I think our question continues to be, what next? How does this benefit like the people making your games? How does this increase the quality of your games going forward? I suppose, you know, as a benefit of like shifting things down a little bit and making things a little bit smaller, a game like Dead Island 2 coming out and selling a couple million copies will look a little bit more like fruitful on a bottom line than it did before. Whereas you mentioned the Embracer Group was so top heavy that successful games just didn't make any sort of dent in that structure at all. So it's like, okay, that's another benefit. But again, that just feels like a byproduct of the current strategy of making it easier to raise money. What is the actual vision? And we just continue to hear nothing about that.
So like, it's an ill omen to begin with when you name your company THQ. Yeah. Like if you're starting off
the toy headquarters, you mean? Come on, what's wrong with that?
If you're starting off from the idea of we want to get AA games back, we want to bring them back into the industry, and then that fails, like your only choices at that point are to scale down or scale up. And it doesn't sound like they're scaling down. It doesn't sound like they're thinking, oh, we failed because we put too much money into a Kingdoms of Amalur remaster that nobody bought the first time around. Like they don't, I think, have a good sense of what the audience will buy. They don't have a good sense of what things will cost them in the end. So they're going on a tear right now and like closing studios and firing developers and all that jazz. But I think the main problem is that they're like you said, still ultimately no vision for that company as a whole. If they're still trying to push AA, yeah, there might be some success there, but it's not enough to like sustain a large company.
Right. And it's you know, the businesses that it stayed in, that it remained in, that it didn't shed or close or sell or send off on its own, are the ones that seem to already have lucrative deals. So it's like Crystal Dynamics and Eidos. These things are either making Tomb Raider, or they have a deal with Amazon, or they're working with Microsoft and Perfect Dark already. Yeah. Again, it's like a visionless way of doing things, where it's like, okay, we already have the money coming in there and we have agreements. Let's just stick with that. I think that okay, do you have like a plan to then follow any of these things up in the future? Lord of the Rings, you're right, sort of just runs itself at a certain point. Make several Lord of the Rings games, maybe similar to the way Warhammer operates, and one or two of those will hit pretty hard out of the 10, and that'll fund the rest. I can kind of see that. That's just like normal business, like running something with a big IP. I sort of don't blame you. Everyone is trying to figure out how to do that right now. It's just everything else is such a mess. And I don't think that they have presented an answer here. This just feels a little bit like a Fugazi, House of Mirrors, like they've shaken things up and trying to like make us feel differently about it, and making specifically investors feel differently about it. And I think most gamers continue to look at this situation being like, I know what this is. It's the same thing it just was, which is something I never trusted in the first place, and rightfully so.
There's also like a brain drain argument to make here, because like if you're a talented developer and you have your experience at shipping AAA games, why would you go work on a Lord of the Rings game for Embracer? Like that's what we're hoping for, is a good Lord of the Rings game, but good games come from good people. And if good people don't want to, or they're worried about their job security even before a project ends, they're not going to want to like up and move to wherever they're making a Lord of the Rings game. They're not going to want to work with producers who don't know what they're doing. They're going to want to like just say like, I don't know, Respawn's making a new thing. I want to go try that instead.
Yeah, and I mean, would you risk it? Because I mean, I'm like looking at one of the paragraphs in the story, one of the last paragraphs here. Some of the most high-profile moves from Embracer included the reported cancellation of a Deus Ex game, the closures of Saints Row Studio Volition, and as well as the closure of Time Splitters developer Free Radical. It's like, okay, a Saints Row game came out, didn't do very well, kind of missed the mark. instead of trying again, close the studio. Deus Ex is a series people are asking for again. They were trying it. They were making it. Close that down. Time Splitters, a series that people were asking to come back. Some people were asking to come back. They were making it. They gave up on it. It's like you're going to come in there with like a passion to try to make something for Embracer. And it seems like Embracer, if they get a little bit of cold feet, the first plan is cut out the things that have like maybe the probably were the biggest budgets there. And again, they're operating backwards from money, and it's a business, whatever. But it feels like a long-term strategy that is not going to pan out for them. So you're right. Why would people that have talent, especially the high demand still, even like with everyone getting laid off, senior developers in such high demand still, why would they go do? They wouldn't. They just wouldn't.
Yeah. I if I got offered a job at Embracer, I would probably take it just to be like, yeah, let's see this until the wheels fall off kind of thing. But like the wheels are gonna fall off.
Yeah.
They do not have a sustainable model going. So I don't know where they have an amount of unearned confidence in themselves that I don't think will bear out.
Yep. And all of this is born out of like that cheap capital mentioned earlier, and the stock markets in Europe kind of being like sort of depressed compared to the rest of the world. So it made it very easy for them to make these moves. And then as soon as like everything flipped and it's like those depressed markets turned into economies with massive inflation, and they had to like raise interest rates super high. It's like it was just this perfect recipe for them to be screwed. And none of that stuff has been answered for. Like none of that has been solved. These macroeconomic issues. And so they're still trying to operate in there and do kind of like we keep saying the same thing under a slightly different form. I don't think that, but yeah, like you said, the wheels are going to come off.
Yeah, I like. They recently just like Saber split off from them. Saber was working on some stuff that in theory would revitalize their AA, AAA hybrid model. But if Saber was like, hey, we don't want to deal with this anymore, then no one's going to want to deal with it.
Yep. Yeah. And Saber's like the one that does seem to have a pretty decent idea of like how to accomplish that stuff and how to ship these games. They got Space Marines 2 still coming. And I think, I think that's one of the games that Embracer or what's left of Embracer is still involved with to some degree, but that's not really what we're saying here. Yes, Saber is the kind of thing where it's like if that's the AA that can make sense, if they can't work under Embracer, you're right, no one can.
Yeah.
All right, moving along here, there was some more Metaphor Refantasio news, including the collector's edition pre-orders going live. This is from Darren Bottheus at GameSpot. Atlas has been on fire lately with its Persona games and various other entries in the JRPG genre. And its next title, Metaphor Refantasio, is it Refantasio or Refantasio?
I don't know. I would assume Refantasio.
Yeah, I'm going to say Refantasio, yeah. Are live for PS5 and Xbox Series X. And there's a handsome collector's edition up for grabs that may interest longtime Atlas fans. There's the launch edition, which is $70. The standard $70 launch edition is available to pre-order now at GameStop for PS5 and Xbox Series X. And then there's the $150 collector's edition that comes with the steelbook, soundtrack, art book, Homo Tinta metallic pens, sticker sheet, Kingdom of Uchronia, cloth map. I always like a good cloth map in a video game collector's edition. Costume and battle background music set DLC voucher. There's a history book for Atlas's 35th anniversary, all that stuff. People seem excited about Metaphor Refantasio. Do you think that that last showing really has put this in kind of up there, like right below the tier of Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, where it's like, hey, this is another tier for Atlas?
We'll see. I mean, like they didn't. When you take Hashino out of Persona and you say, hey, make a new thing, they probably have very high expectations of what that new thing would be.
I think they do. Yes.
So like, it's always an uphill battle to sell a new IP, and it sounds like they've at least got the first part of it down, where they've tied that new IP to a thing people already like. So now they're going to like say like, hey, you like Persona, let's try it in a different setting right now. And I don't know how the audience will take to it. It's a day one Game Pass game, right? Or did they?
I know that when it got announced, it was right around the time that also that Capcom Path of the Goddess game was the day one Game Pass game, and I was like, I thought there was another one. Is it this? It might be. Yeah.
I know it was revealed at a Microsoft event, shown for the first time at a Microsoft event.
Yes, that Xbox the summer showcase. Yes.
and I always have trouble remembering if like Phil Spencer said every game will be on Game Pass or whatever before
Sure.
the beginning of a show, because sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. It's real confusing. But I think they've gotten over the hardest hump so far. Whether this game actually does, because Persona took a long time to build up name cachet, whether this game has that same name cachet, especially being the most expensive version of one of these games they've ever made at $70 plus whatever for the custom or special edition. Like I have hopes for the best. I also have hopes that maybe they avoid the worst pratfalls of Persona games when they're making this, and that's also up in the air until we actually see it.
Sure.
So we'll see where this goes. I'm surprisingly, I want to play the game. Of course, I will play it when it comes out. I'm not that excited for it, actually.
What is it missing for you?
Again, as a new IP, I don't have a thing to hold on to for the world yet.
Sure.
And like I know what I'm getting in a Persona game. It's going to be a blank game set in Japan about teenagers with the color green or whatever, and like it'll be about existentialism as much as it is about like, does that girl in class like me?
Right.
For Fantasio, I know there's a train and I know there's weird looking monsters. Beyond that, I don't really have like I'll play it because of the lineage, but I don't have a sense of what is this game world offering me yet.
Real quick, Turbo Sean mentioned that this is why I was like, yeah, that sounds familiar. But Persona 3 Reload and was day one, and they announced these things like right next to each other, or talked about them right next to each other in that Xbox showcase. But this one is just a co-marketing deal with Xbox, so not day one in Game Pass.
I feel like that's becoming a thing that like a lot of publishers are worried about, is getting the idea, getting mistaken for being a Game Pass game when you're not actually.
I think it seems like Japanese publishers are a little bit like cooler, like a little bit less worried about that than some, because Sega's returned to it multiple times now, and obviously Atlas has had some games day one, Persona 3 Reload, and Sega seems to really like Game Pass. But you're right, like once that that conversation does happen, you're right, they're like very worried about that because they do have to sell the game. I think they're at a point there with Metaphor Refantasio that people do seem mostly pretty excited. I think people know the wait for Persona 6 is going to continue to be pretty long, so they're like, hey, we're getting this game, let's see what's in there. And I bet once it hits, if it hits the mark for most people, they'll be pretty happy. There is conversations about this game continuing, though. Fans are divided after learning Metaphor Refantasio won't have romance. This is from Kenneth Shepard at Kotaku, one of the nasty boys. Metaphor Refantasio, the upcoming RPG from the developer Atlas's Persona team, will bring in a lot of elements from its predecessor when it launches in October. This includes turn-based combat, social elements called bonds, and a time management mechanic as you live out individual days. But one thing that won't be returning is a romantic relationship system. And while that might sound like a bummer, the reaction from Persona fans has actually been mixed. News of this came from a Japanese Q&A presentation with the development team, thanks to Silicon Era. During the segment, the question of romances came up, and host Mafia Kajita confirmed that love will not be in the air as you travel across Metaphor's fantasy world in hopes of winning an election. The omission is notable for two reasons. Metaphor's social elements seemed mostly identical to Persona's, albeit with different perks in the game's original archetype system, until this point. And romance has historically been a big part of the Persona fandom, even if it has mostly been perfunctory in the games themselves. I see this both ways, Imran. I'm like mostly kind of curious because I think what this offers them is an opportunity to write a main narrative that does include a canon romance that could be maybe more fleshed out. Does that sound like maybe what they're going to go for here?
I think they recognize, rightfully, that some degree of waifu wars is marketing, and they either want to avoid that this first time around or don't want this game to be bogged down by that. One of my most controversial takes is that I think most romance in video games is bad. Like Persona, BioWare games, all that stuff. I think what it does is it turns actual human interaction into a like game faxable like dialogue tree.
Yeah, and I think they put the good coin in until you get the sex. That's
you say you put coins into a vending machine until sex falls out.
Yes,
and exactly. Like I think like that
there is a place for that in some games. Yeah, but I think it gets pretty old after a while.
Right, yeah. And like I never it's not a deal breaker with me. I still
Sure.
love Baldur's Gate. I still tried to romance Karlach. It doesn't
Of
matter
course.
like but ultimately I think like if you can make a good romance without having to go, okay, well you the main character can romance all 15 of these girls. The ideal way is for you to like look up a fact and never say the wrong things to get it all on time. I think that sucks. I think that's not necessary. I think if metaphor is begging away from romance specifically to tell a better story, then go for it. I think that's an interesting idea that I will happily look into. I think more interesting romance is something bespoke and designed and written for a story.
Yeah, I get to a point where for me, my major interaction with romance options in video games is still Fire Emblem Awakening, and then Fire Emblem ever since then has felt like we're beholden to the fans who remember that and like came into the series because of that, and we've sort of tried to replicate it in various ways ever since then, and it's never I don't know, it feels like they're doing it because they feel obligated at a certain point, and sometimes they get further away from it and sometimes they come back to it, but mostly I'm just like, it was great in Awakening, maybe don't feel like you have to do that every time. There's still like the social links in Fire Emblem, there's still going to be bonds in this game similar to the social links in Persona. And for me, that's probably enough. And then if they have a canon written romance, that's probably going to be more fleshed out and better anyhow.
Yeah, I honestly, of all the games that do this sort of thing, I think Hades probably does it best because I never felt like at the beginning, like the problem with say a Mass Effect is that I look at my crew and I think, which one do I want to bang? Which is the creepiest thought you could have in a real life situation. Yep. But like,
and they build the game to make you have that thought too, and it's like I fully engage with that. But it's weird.
Yeah, it's like getting a lineup of all your friends and being like, okay, I could fuck one of you. And like that is I think a real weird thing. But like in Hades, I feel like I'm kind of earning a relationship with these people in a way beyond I chose the right dialogue thing.
Right.
Granted, it is I gave them like X number of scented pots or whatever the hell that thing is. But like it is it feels like a more natural digression into we find that we have a romantic because you can't have chemistry with a video game character. Like you can, but you actually can't really. Chemistry does not work that way.
Yeah.
But if to replace it, you need a game mechanic, and I don't think most games ever do that well.
Yeah, it's definitely something where I mean, listen, it's better than it used to be, but that's not saying much, right? I think that's where we're at with the way that stuff works. And this is like I think we're both like very light criticism. Like if games have this stuff, it's like not a deal breaker, and it's not even really a bad thing. It's just like I think we tried that. It was maybe fine in that one game, but building these games in such a way that's like, no, they have to have that to be in this genre or to be in this series, and that's where it kind of holds things back a little bit. And if Metaphor Refantasio is this opportunity for them to work in a different setting, and that enables them to then try things a little bit different that seemingly like they wanted to try for a while, and now they have this chance, that seems good to me. It seems like a good thing.
Sometimes taking a swing for things means omitting things, and I think that is every game developer's right to try that.
Yeah, and it creates space and for other things to maybe happen in the future as well to improve these things or try something completely different.
Yeah.
All right, more RPG news. Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance adds 75 hours of new content. Mother of God. This is from Alberto Garrido at Game Reactor. And does all this fit on a Nintendo Switch cartridge? That's the question on my mind after new details were revealed by producer Shinjiro Takada, director Shigo Komori, and composer Ryota Kozuka about Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance. The trio of series historians at Atlas have been at the reins of this new version of Shin Megami Tensei V, and in an interview with GameSpot, they shared some truly surprising facts. For starters, the estimated time it will take you to play through the new content is estimated to be around 75 hours, so we can already call this version of call it the royal treatment that made Persona 5 great. However, we know that that here the new story doesn't overlap with the original and runs on a different path, which also gives it the main differentiating element from the studio's other work in its JRPG series. But it's not just new features, enemies, and characters, such as the new party member that Vengeance is packed with. They've also rewritten 80% of Shin Megami Tensei V's themes and added a whole bunch more to a soundtrack famous for its mix of styles. For me, it's like, man, that's flabbergasting, but it's actually kind of pretty par for the course for the way that this company does these things, right?
Yeah. for Atlas is one of those things of, yeah, you can buy the first run. You're gonna miss things out when you get this, like the inevitable second version. But like, I don't know. I liked Shin Megami Tensei more than, or like 5 specifically more than most. I don't think that game's problem was that it needed 75 more hours of things. It needed better pacing in general. I don't feel like adding an entirely separate track to that makes that better. But we'll see. Maybe it turns out this is one of those things where like actually the extra content is the best thing in the game. I'm not going to play it to find out. I gave that game my 60 hours or whatever already. Right. I don't like that's the other side of that Atlas like extra content thing. I've already done this. I bought Persona 5 Royal. Probably not going to play it. Like it's never like I didn't largely dislike that game. It's just there's so many other, like I was saying, I played Prince of Persia. If playing a new version of a game I've already played sacrifices an existing game that I have not played, then like it's probably just not worth it for me. There are mega 10 fans that are going to really like want this and want this new version, or they didn't play the original because it was on Switch or it ran badly or whatever reason you wanted to have. But like for me, as someone that has played this game, I don't need another 75 hours.
Right. It requires a certain amount of love to like get something out of that. And there are definitely people whenever I talk to someone about Persona 5 Royal, most people who played both don't have any regrets. They're glad they did that. They really like Persona 5 and they like Royal even more. They thought it was worth their time. And there will, like you said, there will be Tensei fans out there that do that. But well, you know, that's not going to be everybody. And I think at a certain point, seeing that 75-hour number is maybe a little scary for people who might be on the fence.
Yeah, I imagine like Atlas clearly does this all the time. So clearly they see a marketing plan and like a increase in sales or something for this kind of thing. And it does make sense for a developer to just like, hey, what if we spend the next 2 years on something that's like mostly already done and just like build on that foundation. That used to be sequels, but now it's like remastered content. I think for most people, they are going to look at this and they're going to go, I've never played Shin Megami Tensei 5. This seems like the version to get. Whether they actually get to that or get through all that is a totally different question that I don't think Atlas cares about, but this does seem to work for them.
Yes, absolutely. Breaking news real quick. I forgot to talk about this in the Stellar Blade review roundup earlier. There's a section of the game where you could go up to a shop and the word hard appears next to the letter R and then shop. And it's just so it looks like it says hard R shop. And a lot of people are pointing this out on online. And they're like, that's probably going to get patched out. Turns out it has already been patched out. It now says crime R shop. And the crime, to be fair, the hard was always a graffiti next to the R. This was, I think, likely a coincidence. It's the kind of thing where that hard graffiti shows up in a lot of places in that world. But did you see this when you were playing the game?
Yeah, so actually the reason this got patched out was I saw this, immediately called upstairs to my wife. It was like, hey, you should fucking see this thing that I'm looking at right now. She reached out to Sony and like they're like, oh, we didn't know about this. And yeah. But like there's an article on IGN.com about it. But I think that was probably intentional, but not intentional in the racism way. I think it was intentional in the for them hard R. A mistake you have made as well, I think.
Correct. I have.
Meant R-rated.
R-rated.
There are a few places in this game where it's very clear an environmental artist was very cheeky.
Yeah.
And wanted to do something that like did not make a whole lot. Like there's a library that for some reason they put a sign of a bookstore on. It's like book buyers or something like that on there. But the lights are out, so it says boo bees. And like I looked at that for a while. I'm like,
that kind of rules. That's hilarious.
It's like very clearly someone is trying to make a joke here. And I think the same thing was happening with this stuff. Because like, yeah, that graffiti does show up everywhere. It is weird that like it's interchangeable with the word crime. But like I don't think they meant anything bad by it. It was really stupid though and very clumsy.
Yeah, clumsy, which is like, yeah. And I think, you know, the hard art thing is something that has like had the shift in meaning in the last 10 years, especially in the United States, mostly because of the podcast where like that joke originated. And And it's like, that's just not going to perpetuate everywhere, and it's going to be easy to make that blunder still. We've seen multiple people do it, not just me. I know Linus Tech Tips thought it meant the other R word, and it was really an R word instead of what it actually means. It's a mistake that could be made. I'm not ready to like assign complete guilt to this based on what we know, and they've already changed it. I do think though that the graffiti of the word crime is also amazing. Just someone out there is just spray painting crime. If I was a graffiti artist, that's the word I'd be spray painting everywhere. That would be my tag.
Yeah, the game, there's a lot of good environmental art in it, but there's a lot of things where like you guys had stickers and you put these stickers everywhere in places that don't always make sense. I think this was probably intentional in a way that like was not great, but like not racist either. But I don't know. It's one of those things where because they made a game that is already so like repellent to so many people, they're not getting the benefit of the doubt from a lot of people. And I think Sony recognized that. It was immediately like, you need to change this now.
Oh yeah. And I bet they got no pushback. Like, oh yeah, we didn't know it meant that. 100%. Yeah. I also shout out to the professionals at the Giant Bomb production team for not putting hard R above me on the outline here. So instead, it just says breaking if you're an audio listener instead of the headline, which is Sony patched out hard R. I appreciate that. That's just good, clean thinking there. All right. 2K faces community backlash after banning leading WWE 2K24 creator. This is from Jordan Midler at VGC. 2K is facing a community backlash following its decision to ban the popular creator. On April 22nd, What's the Status, a creator known for uploading content that is usually inaccessible to players, took to Twitter to announce that all of his uploads, which amounted to dozens of wrestlers and other content, had been removed from the game without warning. The following day, he claimed that he'd been permanently banned from playing the game online, thus losing all access to the community creators' functionality and with no option to appeal. There's not a lot to go on about why he was banned. There is speculation. He often does take characters that are in the game, like the announcers, and then uploads them as wrestlers so you could play as them when you couldn't play as them before. Characters that are hidden that maybe like instead of like taking them out, which might break the game, he takes those and rips them and puts them in the game. He also takes I think women wrestlers and uploads them as male wrestlers. So now that you can have genderless battles in the game. Any one of those could be the thing that like we're like, well, we got to take this out. Who knows? I think the bigger question here though is, community driven content is a bigger and bigger thing, but it's also a messier thing. When something like this happens, it could like break a game like WWE 2K24, a game that people are accustomed to. Like, I get that game, I immediately go online, download all the wrestlers I really want, and go and play it. And if one of the top creators is getting banned, it's the kind of thing where I think that this is like the trouble with this whole idea in the first place. This is someone who is essentially making the game for you, is how many people view it. It's a tough line to walk. What do you think?
You always have to be careful with community stuff because, like, especially if you decide not to explain why something happened, there could be a dozen reasons. It could be they don't like fan mods, which is going to be like kind of a stab in the heart to that game. It could be that like certain wrestlers have really complicated appearance rights or things like that, that by doing all this stuff, they are making that harder to do. I think if you're going to be quiet about it, if you're not going to say the actual reason, you have to say, like, you have to be 100% sure you maintain the moral high ground, which I don't think they have when they, like, I was reading, like, your notes here. So they have Vince McMahon models like still in the game, and like those are fine. As far as I haven't played this game or played the single player story mode. As far as I know, the single player story mode has Brock Lesnar like really involved with it, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what Dan said about it. Like, he definitely is in there, but I think they blur out his face in some of the video footage. But I think you still wrestle against him. Yeah, I think so.
And like, I don't know if you actually did end up reading that court document that came out.
Some of it, yeah.
It is a disgusting, awful.
It is
viscerally terrible. Gave me like actual bad dreams.
It was traumatic to read, just to read it.
Yes. And like Brock Lesnar is, while not named in that document, there's like a good indication that he is the person being talked about in a lot of those things. And like, if you're gonna have that in the game, you need to like tell people why they're getting banned for things. Like that's not a one-to-one A to B sort of thing.
Right.
But it is like you don't have the moral high ground on stuff. All you have is your community. You got to treat the community right.
Yep. It's a tough thing, but you're right. I think you have to establish that baseline communication to really make this whole thing work, because that is how this game thrives in the first place. So, and this is only going to be a more troublesome thing in the future as games rely more and more on user-generated content, which seems like it's going to be more of a thing as more companies like look at the value of something like a Roblox. Like, how can we get in on that action? How can we exploit these teens? I think that this is going to be something they're going to have to figure out. In the meantime, this I'm sure this is very frustrating to people who just want to play a game and go get these characters and are used to doing that. Something that I don't think they've really had a situation like this in the past where they've taken down a lot of the content put in the game by a community creator. It's been kind of the Wild West, anything goes, to the point where it's like there's a lot of like racist imagery and stuff that doesn't get cleared out of like signs and stuff like that in the past. It's like, well, you could at least do that. Are you taking care of that on top of this, or is this just like some lawyer called you, so now you're taking it seriously? Which I get the sense that's what's happening here.
Balancing legal matters in a community that is used to doing what they want is always going to be very difficult. They handled this badly, about as badly as you could. You can't, even if it is a legal matter, even if it is like things that are, more complicated and it might behoove you to be silent in some cases, you need to have an answer for people that is at least better than we're just not talking about it.
Yep, absolutely. Also, I did forget to take the ad break, so I'm just not going to do it. I think Jan will have to cut it in, or Sean will have to cut it in earlier. That's just how it goes sometimes. Real quick, I just want to mention this story. FTC banned non-compete clauses. Yeah, that's something that should have happened. It's just when you think about it, like I always look at it in like a micro situation of, okay, what if there was non-compete clauses for sports players where it's like, once you leave this team, once your contract is up, you can't go play for another sports team for 6 months to a year. It's like, well, of course that would depress their pay, and that's why they don't have that sort of thing. They only have like, once you're contracted for a team, you're on that team, and once that contract is up, you're a free agent. And they do depress the pay by having some non-compete stuff for like younger players until they get older. They have to like graduate into that. So it's like there's an obvious reason why you do that, and it is to depress pay. So this is only a good thing. And like the concern I think these companies always argue, Imran, is that they have proprietary knowledge they could take to our competitors, and at a certain point, so what? Like I'm like, yeah, that's your problem. Pay the person, keep them there.
We'll see how this goes, because I get the feeling the Chamber of Commerce is probably going to bring a lawsuit.
Yeah.
And with this Supreme Court, who the hell knows?
Correct.
But we'll see. I am tentatively very excited. Non-competes have always been illegal in California, so I never really sweated them. But like companies still use them for like basic, do you want to work with us at all? Then you have to agree to this non-compete kind of thing. And I think it's always sucked. The games industry has had a lot of those. There have been developers that have been like laid off and had their non-competes like threatened to the new studio, and I've heard some real bad stories about that. But yeah, this is overall a good thing. I'm really optimistic and hopeful that it stays.
Yep, it makes a ton of sense. It's the kind of thing where I only see benefits to businesses, and how does this help anyone else? And I say that, and it's like, well, that's the kind of thing that you're right, this Supreme Court would find as catnip, but we'll see. All right, let's get to the poll question. While I get that set up, Imran, why don't you tell people where they can find you, what you have going on, remind them about the review, all that good stuff.
You can find me on Elon's health site at ImranZUMG. You can find me on Blue Sky at imrankhan.bluesky.com. I don't forget how Blue Sky
forget
work.
That format too. Yeah.
You can find my Patreon, which I've not hit for a while, but I do intend to relaunch at some point soon, at prosandcons.com, PROSEKHANS.com. You can find my review for Stellar Blade at GameSpot.com, which is sister site to Giant Bomb. So actually, you were obligated to go visit that.
You have to. Yes, that's right. Yeah. You can't watch the show and not.
If you were a member of this website in any way, just watching this, you should go view it and then yell at me on Twitter, because I don't check engines there. I think that's it for things. You can check out my lovely wife's stuff at IGN.com as well.
Hell yes, and you should do that as well. All right, we got the poll question here. This is from Monday, excuse me. Do you want another Watch Dogs game? 25% said yes, 75% said no, and I think we have our answer for why they're not making another one of those. That's a tough hill to climb right there, right?
They should have followed up on 2 rather than making Legion. And I think they know that, but like when Clint Hawking says I have a great idea for a thing, you go with it.
I agree.
Legion was a really good system around a not great open world game. Watch Dogs 2 was overall just great. I think I hated Watch Dogs 1, so like 2 was a big improvement. They poisoned the well. They poisoned the well initially by trying to pretend like 1 had this gravitas to it, like this nostalgia attached.
God, yeah.
Remember the Aiden Pierce iconic cap stuff?
I will never forget his iconic cap, of course.
But like they try to tell people, yeah, you loved Watch Dogs 1, right? And people were like, no, I don't recall loving that which didn't do well for Watch Dogs 2. Then they didn't actually like follow up on what people liked about Watch Dogs 2. So that series is unfortunately, I think, kind of dead. Unless like 20 years later, we get a mobile game about it from,
Yeah, it's. I think that's a good diagnosis of what went down there. I think Legion is the kind of game where I'm like, if there were a huge mod scene for that, I bet I could return to that game and have a lot of fun. I doubt there's a very active mod scene though.
I would love to, like, if you could recruit, say, Superman or something like that in that game through like a PC mod, that would immediately make that game more fun. Because the problem is they thought the granny attacking guards is the funniest thing in the world, and it is funny once.
It's funny once.
And then after that, it's just 35 more hours of gameplay of basically the same thing.
Yep. And it's like you get the sense like they had this idea and they wanted to flesh it out, but they shipped a game instead, which is what you have to do in that situation.
Yep.
All right. New poll question. Are you getting Stellar Blade? Yes or no? I know we did are you going to play the demo a few weeks back? But now that the reviews are out there and you've had a chance to digest that and play the demo, just yes or no, are you going to get Stellar Blade? We'll discuss that on Game Mess Mornings on Giant Bomb tomorrow. Speaking of Giant Bomb, later today, Blight Club does return. It is Wednesday. Yeah, Blight Club returns. Dan's going to get back into Super Dan 64, the Dan of Steel. He's on the last level. We'll see if he's able to beat it. It looks like, I looked into it a little bit. It looks like some real horse shit, and I'm very excited about that.
Can I say, I've known long time like how bad that game is supposed to be. Until I started watching the videos, I had no idea it was that bad.
Yes, I think that's what we've kind of all learned about that game, is that it's like you have this idea in your head. It's like, yeah, it's the rings, it's boring and bad. And it's like, no, it goes so much deeper than that. And that's what Blight Club is all about. So yeah, thanks for watching. I appreciate that. And then, before that, I will be playing some more Fallout New Vegas today, so tune in for that. It's going to be happening very soon after this. I'll have to get that set up, but we'll get going with that very soon. Tomorrow, we'll have, of course, Voicemail Dump Truck. We're going to do a grab bag, play a bunch of different games in the afternoon. And then on Friday, expect UPF, Bombcast, Revengeance, all that good stuff. Imran, thank you so much for spending today talking with me about video games, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Always a fun time.
Absolutely. And actually, you're going to be on Bombcast Revengeance this Friday to talk about more about Stellar Blade. We're going to do our review cast for that on there. So everyone look out for that.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And then thank you all for watching. You're the best audience in gaming. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself and goodbye.